can't solve the world's problems at the level of thinking that created them. Do you know who said this? That was Einstein. And he was pretty good at solving problems. He created a few too, on the way, but he's one of the greatest inspirations I have. Because whenever I hear that quote, I think of young people. I think if we can teach them or let them learn in a way that doesn't have them end up thinking like we do, then maybe they'll figure out some stuff that we haven't yet figured out, which is the basic premise of our Institute for Global Solutions. If we can give them access to some of these really big challenges, talk about them in a way that not only is very honest, but also lets them see that there are as many solutions absolutely as there are challenges, and introduce them to some of those things. And then even more importantly, get out and actually do something about it. So the journey. I was 22 and I found myself in El Salvador in the middle of a civil war. I had gone down as part of my church to try to do whatever I could. And I found myself after about 3 weeks, I'd already been to university, tried pre-med, didn't work out. Turns out chemistry and I don't really get along. So I quit school and I'd gone on this trip to see if I could sort of find my way, and I certainly did, because I found myself in an orphanage called Sakumi in San Salvador. And it was there that I realized that absolutely the thing I'm supposed to do is teach. And it should have been more obvious to me, because for 7 generations with my father, we've been teachers or preachers, which is ironic because I'm a Mennonite. And we're supposed to be really good farmers, but apparently not in my family. It never worked out, so we did the next closest thing, I guess. So I got my teaching degree, and I taught for some time, and I did my best. I was on a reservation for a couple of years, which is actually where I think I learned how to be a good teacher. That was the most challenging and most inspiring place that I possibly could have had my first job. I came back to here. I taught with Jennifer at Bayside for quite a few years. And eventually, I ended up back in Claremont, where I'd done my intern year. And it's an interesting school in that it's very much like the high school that I went to. It was kind of upper middle class, at least when I went back there. And you feel like you could do just about anything with those kids, or at least they had many opportunities. They were probably going to do all right at the end. But what if we could inspire them in a way that really had them take on these big challenges? So I taught English, I taught PE, I taught mechanics was my first job. I've never even changed the oil in my engine before. And now I have an electric car, so I don't have to, which I find would be helpful. I taught business. I taught anything you could possibly imagine. And what kept coming up were really important questions that kids were asking. And I never felt like I had enough time to address them. They desperately wanted to talk about really big challenges that they knew to be out there, but very few adults were willing to have that conversation. So I remember Brianne, and she actually sat beside Caleb Worthy. Colin, you may remember that name. We were talking about the chrysalids, and as a result, we were talking about nuclear weapons and nuclear war. And as we got into the conversation, this girl at the back, Brianne, said, "Why do we have nuclear weapons?" And I couldn't really answer that question. But that I actually said to her, "Brianne, that's the single greatest question that I've been asked as an English teacher, and I wonder whether there aren't some adults that should ask that same question." And I kept getting really honest, amazing questions from young people at that level. And I kept trying to carve out more and more out of my lessons with Shakespeare. I love teaching Shakespeare. And various social studies lessons that we didn't talk about. Lunar reality, there's lots of amazing things there, and I still teach about lunar reality. But I was craving for the opportunity to talk to them about questions they had about really big issues that they knew to be true, but didn't know enough about them and wanted the opportunity to follow up. So about 10 years ago, I saw a climate scientist. He actually came to our school, and he laid out the challenge of climate change from a scientific perspective. and it was amazing to watch. He was a wonderfully gentle man. And the thing that struck me the most was he showed what could happen with carbon and where the emissions would go up. And then eventually, if we took certain course, they would come back down again. And I had just lost my grandfather at 97 years old. He was a teacher in a one-room schoolhouse, ironically. My father was born at the back of one of these in Saskatchewan, just outside of Saskatchewan. And he was a great inspiration to me. He taught for 42 years. And the year that this climate scientist kept coming back to was 2100. If we did these things, by 2100 we could end up with a climate that was much the same as the one that I got to experience when I was a teenager. And I did the math and I realized that my son, who had just been born, would be 97 in 2100. Which for me absolutely defined what I needed to do next. Because I envisioned my son at 97 talking to his grandchildren and maybe great-grandchildren and talking about this time when big decisions needed to be made and it was really looking like it could get dire. And my father was actually one of the people that tried to get people to talk about this, that got talked about, to get the knowledge, to actually talk about the solutions of where we can go. And as a result, here we are. You have the world that you see around you. And every time I think about the potential of that conversation, it defines for me what I need to do. So we started a course based on what we thought were some of the biggest challenges of the world. And wrote it up as what we call a BOD, Board Approved something or other. It's one of those names that I never can remember exactly what it stands for. And I was really nervous to go to my principal and ask if it was okay to teach this because these were big challenges. This is heady stuff. And I wanted to start with 16-year-olds, kids in grade 11. And we had the conversation and he was absolutely, let's support this, we can do this. So we started this in 2006. 3 weeks later, the first parents' night. And I started with climate change because it just made sense to me. I think it's one of the challenges that speaks to a lot of other challenges. It's the challenge that we have to deal with because there's a timeline to this. And many of the other challenges that we look at, like poverty, like issues around water, like desertification, like our food, our soil, all of these other things are going to be exacerbated by this one. So 3 weeks in, parent night. Now, if you're a teacher, you realize that once your kids get to grade 11, you don't get that many parents out to meet the teacher night. You're just not that excited anymore. Kids are kind of taking on their own, hopefully, education, and you're lucky if you get 6 or 7 that come out. And sometimes it's just other teachers that want to say, hey, Larry, teach my kid. I know you're not going to get anybody. I had 43 parents in the room that night. And I only had 27 kids in the course, so I thought that was weird. Doubled up. I thought, this is a problem. I'm going to just get lambasted by all these parents for dealing with these huge issues. And I outlined the course and I talked about it and I thought, oh, your kids are so amazing, which they were. For 3 weeks, it's been absolutely a glorious experience, hoping that they would start to forgive me if they saw my passion for it. And the first hand that went up when it was time to ask questions was, what are you going to do for our kids next year? We were 3 weeks in. So I suddenly realized that the biggest problem I was going to have, which was challenging their children with really big, difficult problems, was not going to be a problem at all. In fact, I had to step it up a notch and do something for them next year. So we took on Global Studies 12. The idea was we talk about the big challenges. It's almost more academic in their grade 11 year, and then in grade 12 they get to do something about it. So they started to take whatever their passion was and come up with projects that they wanted to take on. And some of those projects still exist. One of them is we call the CC 350, Climate Change 350 for the number of pound, oh boy, I can get this right because I have a climate scientist as a master's supervisor. Parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. And And that's how many times we ride bicycles around the track, and they get sponsored. We managed to raise in a little over a year $32,000 and put a solar array on the roof of our school, $10,000 in one day. I had a bunch of 16-year-olds write a grant application to Solar BC. And they wrote the whole thing. I just wrote the one page on how this is going to be applicable for what I'm teaching. Handed it in. Found out that our facilities manager, who had originally told these kids, no, we're not going to put solar panels on the roof. It just won't work. We don't get enough sun in Victoria. And I went on to raise that thing. He wrote the same grant. This is his job. And my kids got the $20,000 grant, and he got turned down, which I thought was amazing. He's retired now. I don't know if the two things are related. So that's one of the things we've done, and now we're going on 5 years with this thing, and people are coming from the community. We have kids from all different schools coming out to this event. We have bands playing. It's a remarkable day. And every year it takes on a different tone. So last year I had that one, piss-out grade 9 boy that sits in the back corner and you know he's going to cause you nothing but trouble. Max. You knew his name was going to be Max, right? Because of the prowling animals and what's the book called? You know what I'm talking about. Thank you so much. That was the kid. I thought, you know what? You're going to be a problem.
I teach him first.
Yeah?
Yeah,
he's awesome. That kid turned out to be great. And we got to the CC350 and Max said, I know you usually ride your bikes around it, but I wonder if I can longboard. Now longboard is a skateboard about this long. And Max is about this long. So I thought, you're going to go 140 kilometers on a longboard. Yeah, I want to help. And I went, you're on. So he got 4 of his buddies, and with one leg on the board and one leg on the outside, they went 140 kilometers around this track and ended up just behind the last bike team, maybe 32 minutes, I think was the number. It was remarkable to watch. If we give kids the opportunity to talk about these challenges, they will take them on. And if you've ever tried to teach high school kids, they absolutely think differently than you. They don't have a no switch. There's nothing about them that says that can't be done because it's never been done. They're not there yet. So what we ended up doing, because I don't do this by myself anymore, I work with a wonderful guy called Greg Mitchell and another called Dave Gardner. And where my knowledge reaches them, or more appropriately where my organizational skills reach its end, one of these other people step up. We teach collaboratively. And there's been an energy about teaching that's been remarkable ever since that's happened. We combine courses. So we started with social studies 11, and we teach that with sustainability 11. So we have them for half the day. And the brilliant thing about that is it allows us to get out of the classroom. And I don't know if you know this about your community, but there's an unbelievable place called Halliburton Community Organic Farm. So once again, we walked 7 minutes out of what was supposed to be our classroom into a much more interesting classroom and learned from 5 different organic farmers about what it means to be an organic farmer. We learned how to plant seeds. Our kids learn how to grow food. And what they don't know is they're solving climate change every Wednesday, because the farmers there are growing food for their community, and they're willing to work with our kids. I call it labor for learning. One day I'll have to write a chapter in a master's thesis or something. And then we found out there was a watershed just next to it where we're trying to restore. So I tracked down the scientist that was in charge of that, and I asked her, would you be interested in having a bunch of kids come and help out with this and learn about it? She went, absolutely. And that was 4 years ago, and the remarkable changes that have happened in watching these kids work in this watershed with these scientists. We're learning science, but we're doing it hands-on, and they're actually making a difference. And now I have kids explaining to me at the end of their grade 12 year how the symbiotic relationship between the organic farm and the watershed restoration project works. They're using science that I don't even understand. They didn't get it from me. They either got it from their science classes and figured out how to wind that into what we were teaching them, or they went out and did a whole bunch of extra research. They made films. It's remarkable to see what the work that they can do. I have 5 minutes left.
Well, you're 15.
Oh, I am. God, I'm fast, you're right. So last year we took on probably this year, I guess, the most audacious thing we've done yet. We had a Geography 12 and we combined what we call Global Studies 12 for the first offering. We had 32 kids. We tried to run IGS, as we call it for short, 11, but we only got 17 kids and they wouldn't let us run it. When we got the numbers back for this fall, for our grade 11 offering, we had 51 kids. 51 kids from 17 in 1 year, because they realized they would be able to get out there and actually do some things that at the end of the day they could feel like this was worthwhile. And one of the things in Social Studies 11 is you learn about governance. The actual prescribed learning outcome is you need to learn how to influence provincial and federal levels of government. And I thought, are they kidding me? They want to put that prescribed learning outcome in front of me, because I'll make that happen, absolutely. So what did we do? We said, well, if you're going to learn about how government works, you might as well talk to your top level government representative, right? That's their job. We pay their salary. So we emailed Elizabeth May and I said, hey, we want to come to Ottawa and we're going to take the train. Will you meet us there? And she was, absolutely, let's do that. And we got Lana Popham in, and she spoke to us, our kids, on one of the first days. She was amazing, and she has a kid in grade 10. And we said, hey, you should come on this trip. And she said, yeah, you know what, maybe I will. And unlike a lot of politicians who say stuff like that, she actually did. She actually came on the train. So what ended up happening after a whole lot of organization and support from our community is that we took 37 kids, put them on a train with 1 VP, 4 teachers, 2 parents, and we took the train across the country to figure out how government works. And we went with Elizabeth May and Lana Popham, 2 politicians who every day in the bubble car used it as their classroom. Elizabeth May went from, the very beginning of parliamentary democracy all the way to the Senate scandal in 45 minutes. The Magna Carta all the way through. And then the next day, Lana came up and she talked about how different provincial politics is. And her son was on the train. And the whole time we were going across Canada and learning about Canada as a plan. It was an audacious plan that absolutely worked. And kids got to meet soldiers. Just recently returned from Afghanistan. We were on November 11th, we were in Ottawa at Remembrance Day. The interviews they did based on the 2 questions, which were, what does it mean to be a citizen of Canada, and what is Canada's responsibility to the world, absolutely inspired everybody that we walked into. Suddenly we had politicians clamoring from across partisan lines to come and talk to these kids and give their perspective. We even got the Minister for Citizenship and Immigration. So it was an incredible experience. What I didn't expect is that it seemed like they were more inspired by our kids than our kids were necessarily by them. What our kids got out of it is they are undaunted by politicians, undaunted by politics. They will absolutely get involved because they know these people and they don't think it's that hard. And the same is true for so many of the challenges we get on. We can go outside of disciplines and just figure out how to have our kids become great problem solvers, then they can achieve great things. We just need the support. So I honestly believe doing what I do is a gift, and that the time I get in front of every single kid that comes in front of me is a gift to me, and I just got to do the best I can. Fortunately, we have a ton of support.